You're gonna show me in my workout t-shirt and haven't washed my face. Like, well, it's like the toolbox is bigger, right? So when I first started doing research, I of course like I didn't know very much, and I took a methods class in my MA, and we pretty much just talked about observations. Like it was a teacher who really geeked out on that. Like, and so for my project, like it was just observing someone playing a game. And then as the toolbox gets bigger, and as you read more paper, as I read more papers, and as I talked to teachers who had different methodologies in their toolbox, then I could start to think about, oh, right, like I could do like you know, a large scale experimental study, large scale for the classroom, right? Or, oh, like stimulated recall. Oh, that's neat. Like, let's try that. I could see how that could answer that question. Or, oh, wow, concept maps, pre and post. Oh, okay, I can see how that could get at knowledge development. Or, oh, right, like tracing literacy development over 80 blogs or something like that. Like, it's just, you know, tools got added to the toolbox, and then that sparked something that could help me answer a particular question, and then, you know, we're off to the races, right? I think you could put those two papers into a cage battle, right? Like those papers could like fight to the death. Like they're just completely different, right? I mean, they're inside of games and language learning, but one is very much about digital games and no mediation and like technology affordances and like bare bones vocabulary recall, and the other one is like to what extreme can I push mediation, like socioculturally mediated development over literacy and connected social skills and like broad, they're just, yeah, they could just beat the shit out of each other, right? So, but it, yeah, of course I changed, but I changed as a function of the environment that I was in, and who I was connected to. Like, so for example, like the music video game study on interactivity and vocabulary recall, like I was in a cognitive science PhD, right? I was studying under people who were famous for cognitive load and media effects and multimedia, and all the stuff that I read was on that. And so their work influenced my design of that project because that's the sort of feedback I could get, and that's the sort of PhD, the dissertation that would be approved by them. And it just sort of logically evolved. After that, after I did that PhD, I met many more socioculturalists, and tried to do things that were not cognitivist, right? Like exploring how I could interact with students while they played games. Like a cognitivist research design could answer that question, but it wasn't providing the sort of data was that was satisfying my curiosity. And so I was meeting people who were much more into the sociocultural way of looking at second language development. And so it's very much a like having curiosities, meeting people from different perspectives, struggling to analyze the things that I was observing in my classes and projects and extracurricular things, and needing to develop my own toolbox, but also getting sort of exposed to new types of tools, right? So what the one of the probably the person who's most responsible for who I turned into is a researcher whose name is Neil Johnson, and you probably won't find him. Like he, I worked with him at the University of Aizu for 2 years, so we both finished our PhDs and we both got jobs there. And his research was very much on, right, like saying like, no, the teacher mediates learning, right? Like the teacher is more responsible than just here, do this worksheet and you're going to figure out the rules in your little computer brains, right? It's I need to teach you explicitly what these rules are, and then we can do all that practice and fun stuff, right? But the rules precede things. And so from that, that was the connection to, in conversations, like it was a 2, 3, 4 year conversation of, yeah, like, oh, like the New London group. Oh, that's interesting. Like, where'd you learn that? Oh, like, hey, read this paper. Or, me just saying, oh, where'd you figure this stuff out? Like, I just want to know more. Like, is there like social cultural theory for dummies? And that's where that sort of stuff came in. And he's like sort of retired now. He's in the UK and he's running a program. So he's not actually actively researching, but he, as a friend and as a colleague and, like, veteran of different wars, like he was the one who sort of pushed that pebble down a mountain, right? You made a distinction between like the early interactionist and cognitive science stuff with like laboratory studies, and then the stuff that I'm doing now is much more classroom based and mediated and teacher fronted, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or teacher supported, whatever it is. So I think those are two sides of the field, right? There are people, broadly speaking, there are people who still want to know what effect games have on language acquisition. Okay. um, and I see that as different than what effect teachers and games have on language acquisition. And a lot of the earlier stuff, like the stuff that I did, like the laboratory study with like the music video game and vocabulary recall, people are still doing those studies. They might be doing them in a lab, they might be doing them in a classroom, right? It's very much this transmission model. Like it's very much, um, what buttons do I need to press? What's the magic bullet to get more vocabulary output or more vocabulary recall? The majority of the studies are like that. It's a it's a research project. It's an experiment designed to see what factors are involved with certain outputs. Very much experimental, very short term, very technology focused, connected to motivation. And people have been doing this for like 30 years. Like it's nothing new. It's really not. Like the thing that I did with the music game, there were other people who had done things before me, and there are still dozens of people who are doing things after me, but it's pretty much like just variations on a theme, right? Oh, I'm going to use this game and not this game, and I'm going to look at these vocabulary items and not those, and I'm going to do it with this language and not that. It's like, but nothing, it never produces anything, right? Like I don't see the point, right? And this is my biased opinion, but I don't see the point. So what? Like literally, so what? Because you don't see them trying to transfer that to anything, right? Like, and it's just this sort of like the blinders are on, right? It's that I, for a million different reasons, right? Like the professor's curious, or this is the type of background that they have, and I don't fault them because they're churning out academic stuff and they're building their CVs and they're playing the academic game, and it gets cited, and it's like pop music, right? Like yeah, it sells, right? It plays on the radio, but it doesn't make the world better. And if you go the opposite direction and say, well, like the purpose of education is to whatever, like the purpose of education, I'll just glibly, like to make society better, whatever that means, right? Then research should directly connect to that, whatever that is. And the researcher might say, well, charity work makes society better, so I'm going to have all my students do charity work. I think that's wrong too. Like it's not this sort of like touchy feely, like whatever. I think it's about giving students agency, right? It's about opening students' eyes to the potentials out there and then helping them do what they think they want to do. A lot of research. So, for example, like they do an experimental study and they find a very particular thing, and then they speculate or give implications for other fields or future learning or what teachers might do in the classroom. That's great. That's totally fine because another person might do that, and of course beyond the scope of an experimental study to blah blah blah, right? So what the sort of like the gauntlet or the mantle or whatever that the weapon I'm trying to say with my research now is I'm taking a pedagogical model that includes transfer, right? So we're going to play a game, we're going to discuss a game, we're going to analyze a game, and we're going to apply what we learned in a project in society. And so baked into the research design is transfer, right? And of course, there's still further transfer that can happen. But I think that a different sort of research design and a different sort of writing style and a different sort of publication mode can include bake in transfer and social connections in the ideological backbone, in the methodology, in the data you present, and in the write-up, and the materials that you share, and the method that you share it. It's just like bled through, right? That's and that's the goal, right? Like to show other researchers what's possible with a research design, and to push against other researchers, but then also to show teachers that here are some tools that you can use if you want to apply this in this classroom. And I've given you 30 pages of what I did in the classroom that you can pick and choose from, and I've given you the materials. And so I think research really has to speak to all those different people. And typical research, of course, doesn't do that because there's page limits and word counts and all this kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that you can't publish a blog or just like post it on Twitter or, share it with your buddies, Honestly, like, first of all, I'm writing for myself, man. Like, if I have to be honest, like, I have that I literally have that curiosity, and I want to know if this is possible. I want to know if I can actually explain where these crazy ideas came from, and from Frary and Dewey and all these other people. And is it actually implementable in a classroom? Yes. How? Why? Did it work? There's the paper. Like, my satisfaction, my curiosity was satiated. Put a pin in it. And if somebody else takes that and can run with it, or do something different, or chop it up, or reject it, or fight it, good. Yeah, because like the advice of always try to make sure you're not the smartest person in the room is really good advice. Like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you got to find another room, because you're not going to learn anything that way. Like, you need people like your class. Like, you need somebody who is going to push you, who's going to challenge your assumptions, who's going to ask questions, who's going to show you things, even if you're not ready for it, right? Like Larry Cuban, or like, school reproducing society. Like, I didn't understand that for 15 years after I took that class, but now I get it. And it's like, so, and you don't even know if you're the smartest person in the room or not. And you don't know what the smartest room is until you experience a bunch of different shit. Yeah, I mean, you're in the middle of it right now, right? Like, the blinders are coming off your eyes about professors and politics and communication and leveling up and points on your CV and building a career. And there's definitely a game. There's a game, right? There's a game that's being played, and people, there are winners and there are losers. And if you can play the game, or if you can't play the game, like, it has consequences. To play the traditional academic game at the level that a Steve Thorne or Lantolf or David Buckingham or Larry Cuban plays it at, right? Like the Q1, the top tier qualitative journals. I'm not smart enough yet. And I know if I put in enough Pomodoros, I'm sure I can get the papers in there, right? But I also don't think I need to. And that's my privilege as a tenured professor working in Japan with a research budget and good students and technology and whatever. I need to figure out how to publish something and make it accessible and discoverable and implementable by more teachers. And part of that's LLP, right? Part of that's the open access, open peer-reviewed stuff, and a community on Discord and Twitter and LLPX and all these sorts of things. But part of it is figuring out really effective ways of connecting with people who want to be connected with. And so my research now is much more about, like, what can I do as a teacher, and how can students help each other, and what does that ecosystem look like, and that sort of like, how can we push against the constraints of the classroom and slowly help students see their place and their roles and the influences that they can have in society. And I still don't know what the hell that looks like, but I've been trying for a couple of years, and I think it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going for a long time because there's no end to where that goes. I think doing dead end vocabulary studies, definitely that you get painted into a corner, right? Maybe.